Hello, this is David Burke, and I want to welcome you back to my second installment of A Warm Springs Memoir. And this one is about the water. It's kind of an important subject. It's why we're here, and it's what brought Roosevelt here. It's what brought several people here over the past few centuries. Let's start at the beginning. And I tried this week to practice picture in picture, and quite frankly, it's tough to learn some of these new programs. These professional podcasters, they are good at what they do, or they got a bunch of people doing it, or they've got time to do it. But anyhow, how did the water come to be? People ask that all the time. And, it starts with rainfall on top of Pine Mountain in western central Georgia. There's a old fault line running east-west, northeast, southwest, from Alabama up to Barnesville, Georgia, called the Tawaliga Fault. It's a solid wall of granite now, and when an earthquake happens, which they do happen here, they're probably on the scale of maybe 3 to 4, but when it's 4 or 5 miles deep and on a wall of rock, I never have felt anything. But the mountain around here is called Pine Mountain. There's another mountain nearby called Oak Mountain, and we're almost at the very, very end of the Appalachian chain. We are in a part of Appalachians, but not when you compare it to the Blue Ridge, the Smokies, and on up into North Carolina, etc., Virginia, Maine, all the big mountains. But there are many different types of waters that are found here. The black sulfur springs, the cold springs, the red sulfur springs, the white sulfur springs, the chalybeate springs, and our warm spring. The cold springs nearby run around 62 degrees Fahrenheit year round, and it is about 1,200 gallons a minute, and that's what forms today the nation's first fish hatchery that started around 1890s, and Georgia has one of the first national fish hatcheries, and it's a beautiful little park, walking trails, etc. But Roosevelt wondered about the water here. He says, nobody knows anything about the water. Let me get you his exact quote here, because I liked it. It influenced me when we got to writing about the book, because everything began to call. In fact, chapter 2, Rendezvous with Destiny. Excuse my drifting here. But chapter 1 in the book, we titled it A Unique Geology, because it is. Roosevelt said, nobody knows anything about the water, where it comes from, where it goes. All we know is that out of these hills comes all kinds of waters. And he said that in 1933 on his annual Founders Day visit, Thanksgiving here with the patients. He would do that as often as he could. The types of rocks that are in Pine Mountain that the water flows through are woodland gneiss, Manchester schists, and a fractured channel of Hollis quartzite. And the water can flow through that, picking up minerals, elements, and forming a combination that give it its therapeutic values. So rainfall falling through the mountain travels 3,800 feet deep towards the center of the earth, where pressures and natural heat warm the water up to 120 degrees Fahrenheit. It's hot water. It's hot spring. It hits the Tawaliga fault line. Backfilling on itself, it flows up, cooling down to 88 degrees when it comes out of the mountain at the base of Pine Mountain, and that's there in Warm Springs. It's more than just warm water. This minerals and elements pick up are magnesium, sulfate, bicarbonate, not sulfur, but sulfate, bicarbonate, and other minerals, and it makes it one of the most buoyant sources of fresh water in the world. The magnesium sulfate, to you athletic folks out there, that's Epsom salts. This water is like Epsom salts. You can swim in the water effortlessly for a couple hours. And you know how you used to go to football practice or cheerleading practice or do workouts for a couple hours, go jog around the block, and you're tired. You come home, you soak in an Epsom salts bath. Why? Because it soothes your muscles. That's what this water does, and that's what gave it its biggest therapeutic value. Another great um, benefit from the water is its source of bicarbonate, which means the water holds you up. You can swim effortlessly with water that is soothing your muscles, holding you up. Some say it was almost impossible for you to drown. There's a good chart in the 1937 U.S. Geological Survey. If you want to look at all the minerals, because of all the springs around here, it'll tell you what the percentages of magnesium, sulfate, silica, etc. are. And it's a interesting technical read if you like that. I found it fine. But the water drew people, beginning with mankind when they started settling in this part of the world. The Creek Nation settled here. And of course, the Cherokee were to the north, there's Seminole to the south, several tribes in this region of the southeast. But this was Creek country. And it remained so until around 1832, when the Trail of Tears began. And basically, we kicked the creek out and took over it. But their trading trails gave way to stagecoach trails, and that gave way to train trails. White folks, European settlers, came here and traded with the Indians. There were north-south trails or east-west trails. One of the north-south trails, for example, will become the Southern Railway. The east-west will become the CSX line as it is today. Back in Roosevelt's days, they were the Alabama, Birmingham, and Atlantic, and then the Atlantic, Midland, and Gulf north-south lines. And David Rose, who was a treasurer of the ABE, Atlanta, Midland, and Gulf, AM&G, happened to own some property here, and he built an inn, and it was called the Merriweather Inn. And a couple inns he built before this had burned, and being the inheritor of the property, he built the inns up, and the new Merriweather Inn, built in 1893, had a 50-foot by 100-foot swimming pool, flowing baths for guests to come here, and quite a few resorts and taverns were built in this area because of all the different springs. For example, over at White Sulphur Springs, which is about 15 miles from Warm Springs, it's where the Black Sulphur Springs are, the Yellow Sulphur Springs, and a big hotel was built there. A friend of mine, Steve Stewart, found a logbook. The hotel burned down, as they all did around this area, but he found a logbook where Jacqueline Bouvier, who became Jacqueline Kennedy, visited there back in the early 20th century. So the Indian trails gave way to stage routes. The train routes soon followed. And in the town, or in the area, a town grew. Two brothers, Benjamin and Franklin Bulloch, founded the town of Bullochville, Bullochville, Bullochville. And now they're no relation. They were from North Carolina. Many people thought that because Eleanor's great-grandfather, one of the first governors of Georgia, whose name was Bulloch, he was from Savannah, and he's a Revolutionary War hero, but no relation to the Bullocks of Bullochville. But these two brothers built up the town, and the future looked bright. There was a hotel, there was a bank, post office, churches, schools. John Mustian, again, developing the first inns, gave them over to Charles Davis, who built the latest Merriweather Inn, and it stayed. By the time Roosevelt got here, the Merriweather Inn was untreated lumber in Georgia don't last long. So this 3-story hotel pretty much gave way to what I call termites. It was under the management of Tom Loyalist and George Foster Peabody. And these guys are the ones that told Roosevelt about the quality of the water, and that they had seen a patient named Louis Joseph. There were no patients yet, but a polio victim, they called themselves. Louis Joseph had a timeshare, if you will, a family cottage on the Merriweather Inn property, the reserve property, and his family lived in Columbus, would come up to the Warm Springs and swim and play. And over 3 summers, Louis Joseph, just playing in the water, playing hard, uh, was able to throw away his crutches and his canes. And Tom Loyalist, George Peabody saw that, and them being the managers of the property and the property falling apart, they needed money. Well, their friend Peabody is friends with Roosevelt. Roosevelt has polio. Roosevelt has money. Peabody invites him down here for two reasons. One, maybe to help him, but two, maybe he can get some money out of the deal and help fix up the property. Some of the marketing materials going out those days, the water, I'm going to read this to you. In one of the natural wonders of America, flowing at 1,800 gallons per minute with temperatures of the water at 90 degrees, it's a pleasant, effective cure for rheumatism, dyspepsia, whatever that is, sounds like something with the stomach, insomnia, diseases of the skin, the liver, and the kidneys. So there were brochures going out, and with 2 train routes in the area, this place flourished until about the automobile time. When the automobile came around, the Warm Springs started going downhill as people started traveling to other places. But on October 3rd, 1924, that's when Roosevelt disembarked the train. And the next day, on October 4th, he took his first swim in the Warm Springs, and his life's about to change. He stayed down here a few weeks that autumn, well, 100 years ago, 101 years ago. But he stayed around here, driving the countryside in the evening time, swimming and exercising during the day, bragging about how good the water felt. In fact, a newspaper man, Claiborne Gregory from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, came down here and interviewed Roosevelt. Said, why are you here? And Roosevelt said, the water. It takes about 2 weeks for you to feel the effects. That's what the doctors say. And Roosevelt, see this leg right here? Talking about his right leg. It's the first time I've been able to move this leg in 3 years. That right there was a beacon of hope for FDR. He saw the water as a cure. And the newspaper article, Roosevelt asked, you're not going to write about this, are you? The newspaper man says, no. It's just between you and me. Well, the newspaper article went out in October of 24, and thousands of people across the country read it, syndicated, and it talked about Roosevelt will swim his way to health. It talked about his cure he had discovered for his polio at the Warm Springs. So, unbeknownst to FDR, who went home for the winter, in the newspaper article said he was coming back for a visit in the spring of 25. When he did get back, there were people waiting on him here. And at that time, that's when he became, to the older kids, they called him Doc. The younger kids called him Rosie. And so now the water's taking on a different purpose. For all this time, it had been a tourist resort. Travelers coming to the pools didn't want to swim with polio patients. People thought polio traveled through water. I'm not laughing because it's funny. I'm just laughing because looking back, as we do at history, it is kind of funny. So Roosevelt issued the last tourist out of here. People say, why don't y'all use the water today? Well, you had your chance. Roosevelt built another pool so public could swim in it, and he bought the property here and created the world's first treatment center for polio patients, the Georgia Warm Springs Foundation, and used the pool for treatment, but the water flowing, tourists said, we're not swimming in that, not with polio patients. So he kicked the last tourist out of here and developed all his thoughts and money and energy into helping people out, namely the polio patients. So the Warm Springs now had a new purpose. In 1926 is when he bought, using 2/3 of his personal wealth, he bought the Warm Springs that included the Merriweather Inn and 27 cottages. In 1927, he incorporated the Georgia Warm Springs Foundation. Again, that's the first treatment center for polio patients in the world. Nothing had ever been done like it before. But Roosevelt wrote, I need help. I'm by myself. I can't do it alone. He put out a call for pioneers. Let me read you a paragraph here. He says, I think most cripples, children or adult, are worth taking an interest in. Economically, this work that we're doing here is sound. Humanely, it is right. Incidentally, it's reaching into a field, and this is key, a field where no other agency is now adequately reaching. I need pioneers. Physical therapy did not exist as a science at that point. There were physical people, or they called them physios, in the country. There were nurses, there were people helping people, but there was no physical therapy science. There was no occupational therapy science. There was no brace making, which that included, science. There was no recreational therapy as a science to help people that had disabilities. Roosevelt incorporated all that into the Georgia Warm Springs Foundation. The first group of young women that came here, dressed in scantily clad bathing suits of the 1920s. Most women in the 1920s, you had to wear a dress and all kinds of wool clothing, looked like a burqa, but to go swimming in public. But here, because it was therapy, they could dress in their little bathing suits. Push boys were hired to push patients around, and a lot of dating occurred. The physios, a lot of marriages occurred here between patients and the physios, or between push boys and patients, because you're in the middle of nowhere, and these relationships developed, and they fell in love. And, well, one example, Suzanne Pike and Gene Pike. He was a push boy, she was a patient. They got married and lived happily ever after. I can name plenty of others. Eleanor Ford came down here. A friend of their family, Elizabeth Pearson, who had a cottage here, would come here for therapeutic reasons, and her husband, and swim in the water. And Roosevelt developed a friendship with her, and she chronicled many photographs you'll see of the Warm Springs during those, I call them glory years, were done by her. She filmed with her camera and video, or movie camera then, Roosevelt swimming in the springs, and take pictures of the springs. They took pictures of the therapies that were going on, the picnics they were having. But Eleanor Ford came down with her husband, Edsel Ford, and they gave, I think, a $15,000 donation, and Roosevelt was able to build what they called the winter pool. It's a glass enclosed pool, and it was built for the purpose of, you heated the air inside the glass enclosed pool so you could swim in the winter. You could swim in the winter in the water, no problem. Getting out of the water in a 30-degree day, it's cold. So they built this glass enclosed building and had heaters in there that heated the air in the wintertime, plus the heat of the sun coming through the glass warmed up the air. So it was a very comfortable swimming environment. Many photographs, and I'm going to try to see if I can go back, and I'll see if I can edit and take a couple pictures and put in here of the physios when they were in their bathing suits. Beautiful young ladies. The pools looked good. Everything looked bright. The water, it's a tropical paradise here. I got pictures of Roosevelt having therapy. This would go on for decades. I mean, the therapies that would be developed here, the sciences that would occur here, the surgeons that would be trained here, the doctors that would be trained here, physical therapists. I've asked many therapists that had come to the Little White House over the years, where are you from? They'd tell me, how'd you hear about this place? Well, I want to see where our career began. I'm kind of puzzled at that. What do you mean where your career began? Over and over, therapists of all occupational, physical, recreational, have told me that their career began because of Warm Springs, Georgia, because of Roosevelt coming down here, hunting for a cure for his polio, led to their career. The first physical therapist was Helena Mahoney, and she created the program of therapy here. She didn't stay long, but in her place, Alice Lou Plastridge took over the program, and she took it to the level that we know what physical therapy is today, occupational therapy, etc. In fact, it was down here at Warm Springs in 1932, at the height of the Great Depression, that Roosevelt gave his first campaign address. He had already announced he's running for president, I guess, in that winter of 32. But he built him a little cottage on the side of the hill. Of course, it became known as the Little White House before he was president because of an accounting detail. They said Roosevelt already had one cottage he built when he was governor in 1928, and that was the Roosevelt Cottage, or the governor's cottage. This new cottage, they nicknamed the little White House because he wanted to set up an accounting system while he was gone on the road or in office. He wanted to rent his cottage out to doctors, nurses, whoever. And they said to not confuse the accounts, he wants income from one house to be under the governor's cottage or the Roosevelt cottage, and the money from this new cottage to be under account, and just call it the little White House. So that's how the name began. Of course, we elected Roosevelt that year, President of the United States. And a lot of his experiences here, because of Warm Springs, Georgia, led to many New Deal programs. I call it the birthplace of the New Deal. Again, you can argue that politically. I'm not going to go there. But some of the programs that were developed here, such as the Tennessee Valley Authority. I'm on EMC power today. And if you're on co-op power anywhere in this country, it's because of Roosevelt's first power bill in Warm Springs, Georgia, led to him electrifying our country. We did not know the role that would play when World War II came about, but with programs like the CCC, building our nation's parks, building windbreaks, solving the problem of dust bowls, the WPA, one of the biggest government programs in the history of the world. I asked my dad one time, there was a sidewalk in Gainesville and it had WPA stamped on it. I said, Dad, what does that mean? He says, we piddle away. But the WPA is responsible for building the infrastructure as we know it today, our modern country. They built roads, highways, libraries, books, parks, aquariums. You could get a job catching rattlesnakes in the WPA. Yes, there was a lot of waste, but it all comes back to Roosevelt was looking for ways to employ people. It all comes back to Warm Springs, doesn't it? It's a wonderful spring, and that was the name of the program I created when I did homeschooling, because Warm Springs is a natural wonder of Georgia, and there are 7 natural wonders of Georgia, one being Tallulah Gorge, the Okefenokee Swamp, Warm Springs. I'll let you look up the rest of them because they're quite interesting, and that's your school assignment for this week. But, the WPA libraries, books, colleges, campuses, music amphitheaters all across the country. In 1933, Roosevelt came to Warm Springs. We talked about this last week, to celebrate his birthday, and that's when Hitler became Chancellor of Germany, and that's when Roosevelt went to Muscle Shoals, and that's where he got his idea for the Tennessee Valley Authority. If you go up through time, Roosevelt in 1937, 38 created the National Foundation for Infantile Paralysis, and that was because many people couldn't come to Warm Springs and receive the therapy we were getting here, but he wanted every county in the country to be able to have access to that kind of health care. So the March of Dimes was formed. 50% of the money raised by the March of Dimes in your county would stay in your county for help, therapy. If your father's out of work, it might help him pay for some bills. The other 50% of the money went in to pay for vaccine research or search for a cure. And that was the whole purpose of it. So when Roosevelt died in 1945, a year later, they put his picture on the dime to help inspire people to give to the March of Dimes, and people took their little mercury dime and stuck it in an envelope. But then they put Roosevelt's picture on the dime to help inspire people to give to the March of Dimes more. Since him being dead, they thought it might fade away. But after World War II, polio epidemics surged. The baby boomers were being born, and kids every summer were starting to get polio by the score. Numbers grew. And by 1955, 50,000 cases a year were occurring. But on April 12, 1955, because of Warm Springs, Georgia, we got the polio vaccine, the Jonas Salk vaccine. It's kind of interesting. April of 1925, the first polio patient showed up to Warm Springs. April 1945, Roosevelt passed away. April 1955, we got the polio vaccine. And but careers that began in Warm Springs, again, were physical therapists, doctors, surgeons, occupational therapists, scientists, innumerable. They trained thousands of therapists here to go out across the country and to work in the new field of rehabilitative services that was occurring. I hurt my back in 1980, and I went to Shepherd Center in Atlanta, and physical therapists were there, occupational therapists there. I still remember their names. Recreational therapists there. They took us to movie theaters, bowling, because recreation was part of the healing. But who would have thought that some water coming out of a spring would lead to physical and hydrotherapy, or orthotics and occupational therapy, or recreational therapies? But the warm springs still flow today. The water's still used today. And hopefully they'll still continue therapy here today. But there's so many therapeutic centers around the country. You have options. And unfortunately, the Georgia Warm Springs Foundation, it gave way to the GVRA, Georgia Vocational Rehabilitation Agency, and it's lost its not meaning, but it's lost the magic I guess it once had. Everybody in this area worked at the foundation. I've talked to so many people. Where'd you work growing up? At the foundation, at the foundation, at the foundation. It was like a manufacturing facility. People could get jobs at the foundation. Marion Dunn, I talked about him last week. He was a push boy at the foundation, and he tried to join the CC camp, but they wanted to give you 17 shots, and he refused. So it's when they will go to the foundation, they'll hire you. He went to the foundation and got him a job as a push boy, and then of course he got drafted and ultimately got his 17 shots. So it's a neat timeline. On October, Roosevelt came here of 24 to hunt for a cure for polio, and nearly 100 years later, well, you'll see in that October 24 to October 28, you'll see the genesis of the New Deal occur in his head. He wrote about it as he wrote newspaper articles for the Macon Telegraph, and I'll try to put some of those up too. There's hundreds of subjects we can deal with here, and again, I've got a lot to learn how to make these things better and interesting and entertaining. October 3rd, 1928, Roosevelt was now nominated as governor of New York 4 years to the day. Let's jump ahead to the new millennium. October of 2000, Roosevelt is now one of the top people of the past millennium, and his wife, Eleanor, and it's all because of Warm Springs, Georgia. Everything you know about Franklin D. Roosevelt is because of Warm Springs. Every movie you have read, you can talk about everything he did and never mention Warm Springs. But you can't talk about Warm Springs and not mention Roosevelt. And if you really, you can talk about, let's say, the WPA, pick a program and talk about it and get into the good, bad, the ugly of all the politics. But it all is, a friend of mine called it the butterfly effect. And yeah, because Roosevelt came here is why they celebrated 90 years of Social Security the other day. That's a good birthday. I'm on Social Security. But you wouldn't have had it if it weren't for FDR, and you wouldn't have had FDR as president of the United States were it not for Warm Springs, Georgia. So those kind of subjects are what I like to talk about as we continue this adventure. So I hope you got a little bit something about the water. It's 90 degrees coming out of the mountain, 88 at 914 gallons a minute. It's full of minerals that are similar to Epsom salts and bicarbonated. You can swim effortlessly in it. You can drink it. It's a great source of drinking water. It built a town. It built careers. It led to sciences and industries. And it's little known about it, but it happened. So with that, we'll end today's, and we'll see what we talk about. Come back next Saturday and try to do another one of these things. I want to thank y'all for watching. Again, this is the Warm Springs Memoir. This was part 2. I'm David Burke. Bye-bye. Once I figure it out.